Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I'm here today to continue reading Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson. We're going to pick up where we left off with chapter 6 after Maya had tried to go to the city of Manus herself, but had gotten lost and was discovered by a boy who brought her there in a canoe. Chapter 6. The police chief was in a bad temper. He had hoped to go to the matinee of Little Lord Fauntleroy. Colonel de Silva was in his 50s, a crack shot and a man of steel with an amazing mustache, but he loved the theater. Opera, ballet, stories about little boys melting the hearts of ancient earls was all the same to him. But he'd had a cable from the police headquarters in London asking him to give help to Mr. Lowe and Mr. Trapwood, who'd come to the Amazon to find a missing boy and bring him back to England. The detectives were acting for an important person in Britain, the message had said, and he was to do everything he could to make their search easier. It wasn't the first time that the unpleasant Englishman had been to see him. They had asked him to put up notices in the police station and around the city, asking for news of the son of Bernard Taverner, and they had made him put up the amount of the reward on the notice. Not that he expected anyone to come forward. "I'm not prepared to go on like this any longer," said Mr. Trapwood, whose face had turned a livid puce in the heat. "We've talked to 100 people and no one knows about the boy. It's ridiculous. It's a conspiracy." "We have to get back to England," croaked Mr. Lowe in a hoarse voice. He had swallowed the backbone of a spiny fish in his breakfast stew, and it had scratched his throat. "The boy must be brought to Westwood. There is no time to be lost." Both men glared at Colonel de Silva, who looked at the clock and realized that he was going to miss the play. "I tell you, no one knows of such a boy. Unless... perhaps... yes, wait. I think I heard something. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure. There is a boy living with the Umbadua Indians. Some say that he's Mr. Taverner's son and that he left him there to be looked after." "To be looked after by Indians?" Both men stared at him, outraged. "Let me tell you, sir, that the Taverner may have been a wastrel, but he was born a British gentleman." The colonel opened his mouth and shut it again. The less the crows knew, the better. "Then I, too, am a gentleman, signors, and I have an Indian grandmother, a woman of great wisdom who brought me up. There are many mixed marriages here, and we are proud of our ancestry." Mr. Lowe and Mr. Trapwood put their heads together. "You have good evidence that the boy might be Taverner's son?" Colonel de Silva shrugged. "It's rumored. He is said to be a handsome boy and fair. I'll show you the place on the map. It is only 2 days on the riverboat. It will not take long to find out. And the Umbadua people are very gentle," he said, producing a crumpled chart and wondering why he hadn't sent them to the Kirakara, who had been cannibals for generations. "The boat goes at 9 in the morning, he said, and I will send an interpreter with you, and I hope your journey will be a success." When they had left, the colonel picked up a toothpick and watched them out of the window. At least that would get him out of the way for a few days. Not that he expected anyone to give Finn away. What Westwood had done to Bernard Taverner was well known to his friends. Taverner had been fearless in the jungle, but those who had camped with him on our collecting trips remember the nights when he had woken in terror after a dream, with the word Westwood on his lips. After a while, the colonel opened the door to his office. "Go to the museum and tell Professor Glastonbury that I've sent the Englishman upriver," he said to the boy who came out, "but he's to tell Finn to stay where he is. I don't know how long they'll be away." The professor would send the little lad from the fish market, who was Tappy's nephew, up to the huts behind the Carter's house. The people there would do anything for Taverner's son. In the beautiful theater at Manus, with its crimson and gold decorations, its pillars and statues, the audience was waiting for the curtain to go up on Little Lord Fauntleroy. Beatrice and Gwendolen were in the front stalls with their mother. The box of chocolates they were guzzling was on the arm of the seat between them, and their plump figures stirred the tissue paper as they dug for their favorite centers, making a loud rustling sound. "I wanted that one," complained Gwendolen as Beatrice's jaws moved up and down on the hazelnut nougat. "Mama, why can't we have 2 boxes of chocolate? We ought to have one each." Mrs. Carter was craning her head, peering at the people in the audience. "Look at that ridiculous Russian woman," she said as Sergei's mother came down the aisle, "wearing her emeralds in the middle of the afternoon. And they're bringing their governess, giving her ideas." As he passed the twin, Sergei turned and said, "Where's Maya?" "She couldn't come. She isn't well," said Beatrice. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is it anything serious?" The twins shook their head, both together, left to right, right to left, and Sergei moved on. "Doesn't Netta look silly in that dirndl?" said Gwendolyn. "I suppose her parents couldn't afford a proper party frock." It wasn't true that there were no seats left. They could have bought a ticket for Maya quite easily. All the same, the theater was nearly full. The Pilgrim Players may have been a small company that no one had ever heard of, but out here people went to everything. Old ladies had come to see Little Lord Fauntleroy, even without a grandchild in tow, and army colonels with fierce mustaches, and of course every child whose parents could afford a ticket was there. Mrs. Carter opened her program. There was a picture of Clovis King inside. It had been taken 3 years earlier, and he looked very sweet. "Bet Maya doesn't really know him. I bet she made it up," said Gwendolyn. "Clovis King in the part that he has made particularly his own," read Mrs. Carter. Clovis was Cedric, the American boy, who finds he is heir to his grandfather's title and has to leave his simple life in New York, where he is friends with the grocer and the shoeshine man, and travel to England to start a new life as an aristocrat. With his beautiful mother, Dearest, he melts the heart of his stern old grandfather, the Earl, and starts doing good to the peasants on the estate. But there is a dastardly plot. "What's dastardly?" said Beatrice, her mouth full of chocolate. "Wicked," said Miss Carter. "A dastardly plot to usurp Little Lord Fauntleroy's place, which is foiled." But the house lights had dimmed, the curtains parted, the play had begun. Maya ran across the empty square towards the theater. She was out of breath. Her efforts to scrub the blood off her hand and tidy herself up had not been very successful, but she thought of nothing except for keeping her promise to Clovis. But she was too late. Everyone had been sucked into the theater. There were a few beggars on the steps, an old woman selling peanuts, and nobody else. She ran round to the side of the building and found the stage door, which she pushed open. She was in luck. The Goodley's nephew was sitting in the cubbyhole with his feet on the desk, smoking a cigarette. "Oh, please," said Maya, trying to get her breath. "I promised Clovis I'd be here for his opening. We met on the boat. Would you let me wait for him?" "Sure, but why don't you go around front and see the show? I'll tell him you're here." "I can't. There aren't any tickets." The youth raised his eyebrows. "Who told you that?" He turned to the notice board and took down an envelope. "Here, front row of the stalls. Saved for the police chief, but he hasn't turned up. Eaten by a croc, most likely." "Would that be all right?" asked Maya, not wanting to waste time in explaining about crocodiles on the Amazon. "But I don't know if I have enough money." She felt for her purse, but the boy waved it away. "It's free for friends of the company. Better hurry up. It's started." Slipping into her seat, Maya was glad that the theater was dark. If the twins saw her, they would do their best to get her in trouble. Then, in an instant, she was in New York, in a grocer's shop where little Cedric was talking to his friend, the grocer, about the wickedness of the aristocracy. Clovis was good. He didn't look 7, of course, or even 8 or 9, but in his sailor suit, with his wig of long fair curls, he certainly looked like an appealing little boy, and his voice was steady, a clear, high treble. Maya could feel the children in the audience hang on his words. Now a gentleman from England came on stage, a lawyer, rather like her own Mr. Murray, and with him was Dearest, Cedric's mother, who explained to her son that he was really a lord. Clovis was being very good about calling his mother Dearest, even better than on the boat. Maya forgot her worries and settled down to enjoy the play. Soppy or not, Little Lord Fauntleroy was a good story, and when the boy was given a lot of money, which he gave to his poor friends and did not keep for himself, a great sigh went around the audience. Maya stayed in her seat during the first intermission and kept her head down. The twins were several rows further back and hadn't seen her, but she could hear them giggling about something and then nagging their mother to buy them some more chocolates. In the second act, Little Lord Fauntleroy and Dearest reach the great castle that he will inherit, and Cedric melts the hard heart of the old aristocrat, his grandfather. In the book he also made friends with a large, fierce dog, but the Goodleys had left the dog out, which was a pity. It was really touching how, just by believing that his grandfather was a good man, Cedric was making him become good, and Maya wondered if it might work with the twins. If she really believed they were kind, would they become kind? By now, Maya had forgotten all her anxieties. Clovis was really a very good actor, and the audience was loving him. The last act, as in most plays, was the exciting one. A wicked woman turns up at the Earl's castle and pretends that her son is the real Lord Fauntleroy. It of course turns out to not be true, but everyone is very much upset, though Cedric, needless to say, behaves beautifully. When he thinks he might not be the real Lord Fauntleroy, Cedric doesn't worry at all about not being rich and grand anymore. All that worries him is the thought that his grandfather might stop loving him. And as he turns to him and puts his hand on the old man's knee and says, "Will I have to stop being your little boy?" It was on this moving sentence that it happened. Clovis turned his face to the old man and began his speech, and suddenly his voice cracked. He stopped and tried again, and this time he said, "Will I have to stop being your little boy?" in a deep bass voice. If no one had taken any notice, it probably would have righted itself. Everyone was on Clovis's side. But the twins started it. They giggled and tittered. Their titters grew louder, and then the other children who held back joined in, and in a moment the audience was laughing, and the children were falling about. Not all of them, not Netta, not Sergei, certainly not Maya, who sat with her hand over her mouth. But enough of them, enough to go on jeering and laughing through the next two speeches, and then Clovis gave a gasp, turned, and ran into the wings, and the curtain came down. Maya had been standing outside the stage door for half an hour. She had no idea how she was going to get home, but she couldn't leave Clovis in this state of misery. Many of the actors had gone past, but not him. At last she pushed open the door. There was a babble of loud voices talking about cancellation, about financial losses, disaster, and disgrace. Everyone was angry. Everyone was in a state. "Can I see Clovis?" she asked bravely, and they motioned with their heads to the stairs which led to the dressing room. It took her a while to find him in the huge theater, but at last she pushed open the right door and found her friend face down in a couch with his shoulders heaving. "Clovis, don't. You mustn't be like that. It's something that can happen to anyone, and you were terribly good until then." He sat up. His face was blotched, and he was crying. "You don't understand. They're furious. They'll have to cancel all the matinees and lose lots of money, and I can't stand it any longer. I'm going to stow away on the boat and go back to England." Maya looked at him in dismay. "They'll find you. Stowaways are always found. Haven't you got an understudy?" Clovis shook his head. "There was a boy in the last place, but he got typhoid." He got up, really seemed to see Maya for the first time. "You've got blood on your hand. Did you know?" She shook her head impatiently. "It doesn't matter, Clovis. You've got to pull yourself together. It's such a little thing. It is to you because you're not on the stage, and you don't know the Gridleys." He looked at her, and there were still tears in his eyes. "Maya, I've got to get home. Can't you help me? I'll do anything to get away." "I'll try, Clovis. I'll really try." She broke off as a furious voice in the corner was heard calling her name. Mrs. Carter had tracked her down. "I have to go. Look, Clovis, let me think. Just give me time, and don't be so sad. I'll help you somehow. There just has to be something that we can do." That's where we're going to end today. We have kind of a shorter video today because it was a shorter chapter, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow with more when we pick up with chapter 7 of The Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson. The pictures in this book are by Kevin Hawkes, and the publisher is Puffin Books. Once again, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.